This episode of Super Pulp Science is brought to you by The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno Garcia. You can find it at your favorite indie store. If you're like folklore and are interested in learning about Mexican witches, you should check out The Bewitching.
Attention, citizens! It's time for Super Pulp Science.
This is Super Pulp Science, where we talk about how genre gets made. I am here with a very special guest of my own distant past. Sylvia Moreno Garcia is here on the show. And we met in 2013. I was realizing I had to do some math. And if I'm being totally honest, Sylvia, I had to Google it to figure out which KeyCon it was. It was KeyCon 2013, where they did the Lovecraft, all the Lovecraft related stuff. And that is where we first met. I had done Midnight City, and I'm not sure which book it was or if it was just your role as a scholar that brought you first to that convention. Can you remind me?
Wow, that was a while back. Yeah, it
So
was it was my editing, I think, actually at the time, not my writing, because I had only had a short story collection and I didn't have a novel yet, so
wait. No,
my
that
editing.
isn't true.
Yeah.
That's pre-novels. How many novels have you had since then?
11. Yeah.
I love the way from the hip.
Yeah.
11. Just 11.
Yes.
But just so that people don't suddenly feel really bad about themselves, is it not true that you had written some of those before? They had just not been published yet? Or have you done those? Are those fresh 11? Are those a fresh 11?
Those are fresh 11s, yeah. At that, I had written a few things, and none of them had really gotten traction or interest enough to be acquired by a publisher. And so it was around 2013, around KeyCon time, that I got my contract with Solaris, which was my first publisher, and they published Signal to Noise, and that was my my debut novel. But I had done other stuff before. It hadn't quite been the right thing or hadn't landed. So that was the first book that got me representation at that point in time.
You had done Signal to Noise as your debut, but it was a fresh novel. You hadn't gone back and dusted off your old ones. You didn't try resubmitting them. Does that mean that all those early stories, pre 2013, are in a drawer somewhere?
Yes, I mean everything that was a novel or novel shaped idea or notes or initial drafts is in a drawer somewhere, uh, probably going to be destroyed at some point. So, yeah,
Destroyed. Do you say
yeah,
destroyed at some point?
y- yeah, I do. I recently was cleaning up my office and I found like a box of old notes for Gods of Jade and Shadow, and I put them in the shredder. I said, I don't need these. There you go. so, so they disappeared. Yeah.
You know what? I'm really, really happy. I'm the most happy with the fact that my wife cannot hear you say this right now because I was just moving all these dumb book notes and graphic novel things and all this. And she's like, "What's this for?" And it's like, "Oh, these are, I don't know. Are they important? They're not important. I should be empowered by your decision to just throw it all away, right? Because the
Yeah.
book exists now. So what do I need all the notes for making it?"
Yeah, it's out. I'm probably never gonna do anything in that universe again, and even if I do, I think I can do it from scratch. So I just said I don't have the space for it um in the house, so out it goes. I mean, it's space is at a premium in Vancouver.
Oh
I
my.
can't build an annex to to this house, so it's what it is.
If you could build an annex, would you fill it with all your notes or would you ruthlessly excise them as you have now begun to do?
I think if I could build an annex, I would have a better office because my office is located right next to the kitchen, and So anytime anybody wants to have a sandwich, I see them go by, and it's not very conductive for privacy. And but it's the best spot with Wi-Fi in the house, and that's where I am right now. I could go to the attic, but that doesn't have very good Wi-Fi, and so if I'm wanting to have a meeting or something like that, I'm right next to the kitchen, and if somebody's making a cheese sandwich, you know, they're right next to me. And my background is the laundry closet, which is why I have a virtual background right now, because that's the only place where we can fit the mops and the things like that. So my dream is that I can turn this office into a proper laundry room, and then I can move the office to another section of the house that still has good Wi-Fi, but is a little bit more private. So
You know what's kind of amazing about this is that one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, something I really admire about you, and I always have ever since I met you in 2013, was the way in which your life seemed. You specifically, Sylvia, of many of the writers I know, seemed the best able to do the work and live a regular human life together without the one seeming like a barrier to the other. I know that sounds very like highfalutin, like, but the notion of a room of one's own, right? Which everyone like holds up and like, oh, I just want a door I can close and then I can write. You were like, yeah, whatever. I'd write on the subway. Yeah, whatever. I'd write in the, front room of the film editing company I was working for. Like, I would just do what I have to do because I have a story in me to come out. And isn't it so refreshing to realize that, like, when you're trying to just be a living human being, the laundry room is legitimately more important than your writing office. Like, I can confirm this 100%. Our lives improved immensely with two teenage boys as soon as we had a decent laundry room. Like,
absolutely.
I want that for you so much.
Yeah, well, I've written on for a couple of years. I only had the dining room table during what was it? Yeah, like until about 2 years ago, I was working on the dining room table for a full 2 years because our nephew moved in with us, and my writing space became his room. And so I was writing on the dining room table, and now that we moved to a bigger place, um, and that I was like, "Oh, I have finally back my space." But yeah, I mean, I was writing on the kitchen table for a couple of years, there because it's what we had to do to make it work. And I will say that um, it's nice to have a space of your own, but a space of your own can be a very variable definition of a space of your own. So I also went to the library to work and kind of staked out a desk for a while. It's like you learn what are the times that you can go into the library and there's still a desk somewhere and you kind of corner it and that's your desk
Oh my
sort of
god.
situation.
That's so true. Like before I met you, one of my favorite places to write that was just a third space that was available. People would be quiet, but it was also full of books, which is my favorite thing to be in a room full of books. I would just go to the public library wherever I was at, between wherever I was going, what I had to do. I would often send a message like, oh, I have some errands to run, so I'll see you in whatever. But the errand was I was stopping at the library often to write.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
definitely a great space. Yeah. And you don't have to pay for the coffee, unlike Starbucks or something like that. To stay there, like, you don't have to be ordering things periodically so the people don't stare at you and chew you out, so you can stay at the library for really, really long periods of time. So, yeah, the library and yeah, wherever I can, it's more a state of mind, I think, than a physical space.
The Santa Summit. Not the thing with all the Santas. Absolutely the thing with all the Santas. I am in.
It was a bit annoying when I was writing at the dining room table because I would literally tell people, "There's no eating until, I'm done with this." And so if you were hungry, you kind of just went like, "Oh man, mom's still working. We can't have dinner," kind of situation. But otherwise, it it worked out. It was just about sitting down and doing the work somehow. I also wrote a lot from my bed, to be honest, and which is very comfy, and I sort of miss now that I have a desk again. was the bed, just sitting on the bed with the computer on my lap and writing there. It's very cozy. You just wrap yourself in a blanket and you never come out.
Oh, okay, so a couple of things here. I'm gonna quote you back to yourself. "What we have to do to make it work," is what you're describing there.
Yeah.
Um, but, there's a lot of people who would say to themselves, "I don't have the wherewithal, the means, the presence of mind, or frankly, the interest to then make it work and produce 11 novels, uh, from the outside perspective, one after the other, sort of in an unrelenting pace, which I would say many of our listeners are aware of the differences between the traditional publishing model and the self publishing model, and having a sudden, regular pace in self publishing between the two is fairly easy. Yeah, it's up to you what you set the pace. But for you to line up and have this steady rhythm of books coming out from larger publishers, what do you do to make that work aside from writing wherever you are, whenever you are, cozy or uncozy, dinner's waiting, whatever? How, you're still having fun. The books are so fun. So how is it that you can do that? Tell me about that process. Get me into your mind.
Well, it's a thing I love to do the most, so it's not, it's not a chore, it's a treat. Every time I sit down to write, it's it's good. I sometimes I'm on the bus and I'm thinking about characters and chapters and I figure something out, some plot point, how I'm gonna make it happen, and I'm writing on my cell phone or on a napkin or whatever, and I'm saying, "Oh, as soon as I get home, I'm gonna work on this." I literally that's how my brain works. It's sometimes not that great because if you have a great idea and you're in the middle of shopping at the supermarket, you just chuck everything into the basket and that's it, and then you realize you didn't buy everything you needed. Maybe it's going to be a very poor dinner, but it's going to be a great chapter kind of situation. Um,
Also the shopper in our family, and
uh,
I feel so seen by this what you just said, because that's 100% it. I've sort of begun volunteering to do that job for the last few decades of our lives together, simply because if my mind wanders, it's okay if it does, if I'm off topic. But when the list is unfulfilled, I could probably make a Venn diagram that overlaps when Gregory had a dumb idea and why I forgot to bring the cilantro home. Right? Like those things are together. So that's amazing. Um, Vampires, witches, the daughters of monster makers, noir thrillers, cursed cinema. You're not locked into what we would call in the business a single focused genre. An intrigue which is coming out, which is also it's almost a departure from Gods of Jade and Shadow. How does the broader world of publishing respond to the fact that you write what you want?
It's tough. It's a lot easier to write in a single category in traditional publisher. It's almost required if you're self-publishing because, as you mentioned, the publishing cycle is much quicker, much faster with self-publishing, and it generally responds to repetitive efforts. So people who have a series, book 6 of the saga of whatever, or things that fit very well within a certain niche so that a certain writer becomes recognizable. You know that this person just writes, they focus on monster romance gargoyles or something like that, specific kind of niche. That's what really seems to work in self-publishing. And and to a lesser degree, but it's still true in traditional publishing, specializing is what is most, appropriate for most writers or easier for most writers, and when you're jumping from one category to the other, it's very difficult. The only time that that is maybe advisable in traditional publishing is when you have failed completely at something and you need to kind of restart your career. One of the chances that you have is, I mean, there's a pen name, you can change your name and become somebody else and start over again. But the other thing that writers sometimes and their publishers attempt is, well, let's get you into a different category. You didn't do well in young adult, but let's now put you in adult fantasy, something like that. Um, but it's not normally a good long term strategy for anybody. In in my case, it just kind of happened organically. I didn't follow up my first novel with something that was like my first novel. I followed it up with something that was different, and it just happened to be that it sold. I got a contract for it, so then I wrote that, and then in the third one, I also, I mean, I was on contract for that, so that one was there, and because I think because I kind of just got lucky in that sense that, oh, I did something completely different. I wasn't locked into a trilogy. I got into the groove, into the mood of doing that, and just kept on doing it, without, really thinking very clearly in the beginning what I was up to, and now it is more of a project. Now I have thought more about it, what I want to do, uh, what kind of writer do I see myself as. But initially, it was just, kind of, "Oh, I sold this, and then I'm just gonna sell something else, and I'm not gonna really think about what that something else was going to be." I just wrote it, and my agent sold it, and it happened, and it just kept rolling that we've been changing gears. I mean, I did have discussions initially with my agent where I told him I have a desire to explore many different kinds of writing, and he kind of said, "Oh, yeah, that's good." I don't know if he quite understood initially what I meant at that point in time, and now we do understand very clearly each other and what I mean with that. But it just kind of happened initially, and I'm lucky that I stumbled into it, and but I've stumbled into other things. I That's one of the benefits, I think, of not having an MSA, is that you kind of go into it and you learn from talking to other people and reading from other people and all that kind of stuff. But it's not in a traditional structured environment. So there was more opportunity for me to play because I did not feel that I was beholden to a certain kind of shape or form that I had to acquire. I could become something that was quite crazy when you think about it. A bit of a, head of a lion, tail of a horse.
I was just gonna say, your writing
Yeah.
is like a chimera. It's another thing I admire is that whenever I'm thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna make a different kind of book than I did last time," I think, "Oh, is that a bad idea?" I'm like, "Sylvia can do it." Do you've had some I know the word can be a dangerous word in the wrong circles, but you've had some success, right?
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes you get into a problem. I'm not speaking for you. I'm just talking generally now. I think that people can get into a problem that when they have some success as a writer, there can be more expectations on them, but they still have the same number of resources that they've always had. It hasn't really translated into this like great lifting of the veil where all things are possible. They have had some success, but they still have to do it the same way. Has that perceived success been different from the actual life-changing events of, writing next to the laundry room?
Uh, yeah, I think in general I mean, people who are in the business, people who are writers, they have a fairly good idea of what success looks like or what the average successful writer looks like. And it's much closer to reality. People who are completely outside the business, their idea of success comes from movies and TV shows, and therefore it's very bloated. So I know several writers who write full time like me, which is considered a marker of success. And but they write in very different categories and they have very different lives. So I know somebody who's a successful self-published fantasy author. I know what their life is like, and then I know somebody else who is traditionally published, again, fantasy author, and how those things are different. Um, is is kind of funny, but neither one of us is, let's say, Stephen King yet. kind of situation, and that's fine. It is both, um, it's more achievable than you imagine, but also less glamorous than maybe the media makes it out to be, while still being really quite fun, uh, for me to have things like flexible hours now and not having to do the 9 to 5, which I did for a really long time. I only became a full-time freelancer about 3 years ago, so that's when I said, "Oh, I can do this."
Jordan found a guy? What? Yeah, no, but I lost him because
Oh.
I don't know. It all happened so fast. So
You're gonna find him again.
okay, but how?
Because tonight is a very, very special night.
There are some exceptions, but for most writers, it's a bit of a roller coaster. It dips up and down. Most people are not in a situation where they can assure, even if they have had a hit, something that sold well enough, most writers are not in a situation in which they can assure that the next one is going to be um also a hit. And there are circumstances like me, if you're changing genre, that's even murkier to determine because you're going into a completely different field where you might not have an audience. If you're starting a new series, let's say that your last series was successful, you did a trilogy and that worked, but now you are starting a new one. Is that going to be successful? Um, and so there are all these variables that happen. Maybe something a genre that was popular is no longer popular uh, now from a couple of years before, 2, 3 years before. And so there's this element of risk and of chaos always in this business. And that means that you're normally going up and down from book to book, like, your sales can dip, you can do, like, really not great. There are things that you can't predict, tariff, the pandemic, all that kind of stuff that just happens out of the blue that suddenly changes the situation. And, um, and so that creates a very kind of iffy situation where you can't just say that it's an upward trend. There's other businesses or professions where you can say, "Oh, it's a ladder. You just, go up the rungs and then you get to a better place." In this business, you can be more experienced, which generally you would think would lead to more money and be making less money than you were making at the beginning of your career. Or you can go through a really rough patch where you're not doing very well and then suddenly you're doing well again. Um, or it can be like that. Like I say, for me, it's a series of dips and valleys. It goes up, it goes down. And you look at it more, or I look at it more as really long term cycles where something like 1 book or 2 books is really nothing. You have to think of a career as something that is gonna be decades in the making, and then you're gonna be able to view it properly, which sounds kind of daunting, but it's longevity that really, I think, helps out with a lot of this career stuff. It is not the 1 book out of the gate because very few people have the 1 book out of the gate, and you do see it. I mean, I subscribe to Publishers Weekly. I see all the books that were acquired, and there's always somebody that they say, "Oh, 22-year-old author with a six-figure, um, debut, and it's already been scheduled for translation in 7 languages, and it was sold at auction," and you go like, "What the heck?" But then you check some of those notices, and those people disappear, right?
Yeah.
And I'm still here. So, there is something about Darwinian about being able to kind of survive and find your place in the ecosystem,
My
and
friend
that's a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, my friend Jonathan would say, Jonathan Ball, a writer and co-collaborator on a number of projects with me, he says you have to be careful about being a victim of your small success,
Yeah.
right? And live vampire hours. And these two things are really important. Um, in that vein of being a victim of my own small success, I find that the volume of emails and correspondence as a result of even my modest career as a writer and an illustrator, I can't imagine if it scales up at the rate it seems to for me, how much correspondence you must have to push off your inbox on a day to day basis. Have you found that the banality of that is interrupting your writing time?
I like it. I don't mind, doing all the nuts and bolts that you have to do, like your taxes and organizing your receipts and that kind of stuff, because it gives you space to then do the creative work. So then you're not every day. I don't necessarily write every day. There's some days where I'm doing prep work for presentations or research, or I'm getting ready for a meeting, or it's responding to email, that kind of stuff. And it gives a breather with the stuff where you're gonna sit down and you're gonna be writing for a while for me. So it keeps it mixed up, especially if you are like me, full time, you're a full time freelancer. If you just stick to the writing, you can be in bed. I could be in bed for 12 hours, wrapped up in a blanket and not get out and just be typing. And that sounds crazy. So there's other stuff in my life that I have to do that takes me out of the house, like going to meet my accountant or going to make photocopies of something, things like that.
Do you think that 2013 Sylvia planned this? How much of your life today is according to your plan? You seem very intentional in your systems, and even then, you would say, "My plan is to try this, and then I'm going to send this, and I'm going to make sure I keep my hardcover rights, and I'm going to do this." And you would talk about it with such um, calculation, and not in a, just so I don't mischaracter it, dear listeners, not in a what can the world do for me, but in order for my writing to reach the world, there's a number of things I have to do in my plan. Um, are you living the plan?
Um, yeah, in a way, I did want to have a large catalog of works so that I could have a back catalog at a certain point. I did want to be very productive, to be writing a book a year and publishing a book a year. I wanted to be increasingly making more money off it as opposed to, less money. and and I wanted to try my hands at a lot of different genres and projects and things like that. So all of that has happened. There are some, like I say, there are some variables that you really can't control, but there's some stuff that is definitely within your control. And that includes, for me as a writer, things like, oh, well, I don't know, I've never written a Western. I'm going to start researching Westerns. And within the next 3 to 5 years, I'm going to write a Western. This is a real project of mine. It's doing a Western. And so that's in the works. So that's something that is going to happen. Now, I can't tell you this Western is going to be a huge success, and I will, you will no doubt uh, be able to buy a house that is just 7 laundry rooms. So, um, to me, uh, my dream house. No, I'm kidding. But
Leave that house now. And a story in the house with 7 laundry rooms.
yes,
Maybe
exactly.
the circle of hell, though, at a certain point, that kind of.
Yeah, yeah. But but there are some things that you can work towards, I think, always. And for me, that was about having discussions with my agent, such as foreign rights. Can we try to keep these foreign rights? Can we try to keep this audio? What can we do with this? Or even thinking about myself, if nobody wants it, what can I do with this thing? If nobody wants this story, what am I going to do with this story? And I've had that happen a few times. There's a short story right now that I wrote it for an anthology and it was too short, and so they sent it back. They said, "Yeah, no, we don't really want it." And so I was thinking, what am I gonna do with that thing? Because I wrote it, I spent time on it. So it's now been copy edited, and it's probably gonna be a free Christmas freebie at my website or my Patreon.
Now,
And
if you were at our studio during that time where, "Oh, I have a story that's too short to be a full novella and too long to be a short story, and I need something," our secret sauce is add 20 pages of illustration.
there you go.
So if you're ever in that position again, you reach out to us, Sylvia. We got you. We got you. Um, do you think that to use your phrase, the world of writing being full of risk and chaos, do you think that's something that has attracted you to it, or that's something you navigate as a writer?
Uh, I kind of like that. I also am really good at business. Yeah, I'm very good at math, actually. Um, I would probably be a day trader if I wasn't a writer, which sounds kind of weird, or a lawyer. I like both of those things.
Yeah, because research is such a big part of your writing process, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the research part, and then it's the excitement of the hunt for me, in a way. So I like some of that energy jolt that you get when you can't predict everything. But you have to be ready for everything.
You find Ben?
I was not looking for Ben.
Right. Okay, I was just trying to get a drink. The lines are so long, it is literally impossible. It's so weird. Couldn't find him.
That risk and chaos that comes from starting a draft. Like a great example is one that you just said. You've got this idea for a Western. Does the idea, when we're talking about the drafting process, is the setting, I want to write a Western, the thing that drives you towards discovering what the story is really about? Or do you, in your process right now, have an idea of what the story would be really about, and it will require you to research a Western? Like, is it where's the chicken and where's the egg in that process?
Yeah, they've happened, depending with the book that I was working on or the project that I was working on, they have maybe not been, um, one way. Well, some have been one way and some have been the other. Sometimes the genre came first and then other times the story came first and then the genre came. I'm actually working on a graphic novel right now.
Yes.
What I'm doing. And that was kind of a very different project because I have not written a graphic novel before, and I had to go back. Well, I got a bunch of samples of scripts and everything like that. I got a bunch of scripts, but then I was reading the scripts and I was like, I need to go look at them physically. And I haven't read comic books or graphic novels in ages. I did when I was a teenager. I read a lot of them, but I hadn't done that. So I pulled some stuff from the shelves and went to the library and I discovered that Watchmen had very different paneling from what is done nowadays because it's so old, but I hadn't thought about it logically. For me, it was like, well, Watchmen, I mean, I read it when I was young and I didn't look back at it. So I opened it up and I'm like counting panels. Well, that's 9 panels. Okay, nine more panels, a lot of panels per page. Then you go to the library and you just go like, "All right, let me go to the comic book section, open the latest, what's the latest graphic novel that came in, that you have? Okay, this is it. Open it." And you're like, "Wait, there's not 9 panels in this thing."
Yeah.
And this thing is organized completely different. And so that has been I've both gone back to a lot of the stuff that I read and that I liked when I was younger but also looking at some of the new stuff, it's been a completely different discovery and mapping process for me. So this one has been more of I mean, I have the story. The story is no, I can't say what it is. I'm still under contract, but the story is fine. But the medium was a different experience and thinking about the medium. And it's the same thing. It's a similar experience, I think, when you're coming in with the story, but you have to think about then you're thinking about the genre and you're getting immersed in a genre. Maybe something that you haven't maybe that you like, but you haven't done before, or something that is completely alien to you, like, if Western is completely alien to somebody saying like, "Oh my god, well, now, I have to understand the shape of this thing." And so some things have been like that, and so that is a different ball game than the other one, where you really understand, uh, the category that you're going into and the medium as opposed to, like, I don't know, um yeah, so for your audience and for you, it's probably gonna be no big discovery that paneling changed in 30 years. For me, it was just a shocker. I'm like, "I got this. I read Alan Moore. Not a problem."
Well, I mean, if you're going to use that as your baseline and then build from Alan Moore's work, I think you're in a good place on the map. Um, but the medium, kind of demands from a writer. I have done a fair amount of work doing advising where an author will bring a story to me and then I want to do an adaptation and I'll consult on that. Not quite as a substantive editor, but similarly, like how to adjust for the form. And one of the ways we talk about it is just remember it's one verb per character per panel. And that usually means that the story suddenly went from being what they thought was 30 pages of illustration to like 250 pages of illustration if they don't now allow the form to dictate how the story beats are going to be. Has that form changed now that you're looking at the panel spacing and the time and the rhythm of your story? Um, since in prose, the page turn is often arbitrary based on the format of the book, but a page turn is never arbitrary in a comic, or shouldn't be in my if you hear the creaking, that's my soapbox. I'm stepping on it now. I don't think a page turn should ever be arbitrary. It should always be an intentional, forced reveal that the reader is now complicit in the action of making the story go forward, and maybe they didn't want to see what came next, but it's their own fault for turning the page. That's sort of where I'm at. Has that as a genre writer, as someone who's really proficient in setting up story, setting up pace, setting up tone, setting up an escalation. Has that changed in your graphic novel exploration? How you adjust your story?
What I'm doing is I'm thinking of every panel as an emotion. That's what I've been doing to help it. That every panel must express an emotion, and that's how I'm doing that one. And yeah, that there's no gratuitous panels, so no gratuitous space, and the pages are pushing you towards something, as opposed to like, oh, like I could read this page or leave it. That you should push the page and keep reading. And that is a different way to think about story than when you have a book or when you have a short story. I mean, it's also different when you think about visual medium and you think about script writing, how that is. But it does bring into play elements that you normally would not have to consider in when you're writing a novel because they're not relevant to a novel. You can go if you want to, you can go and describe a room for 3 pages. Some really good writers do it. Mrs. Dalloway begins just talking about a party and that's it kind of situation. Whereas when you're doing a script for a graphic novel, that would be a sentence, Mrs. Dalloway enters a room and then you have to think about, yeah, it's like what's she doing? What's the verb? Or in my case, I think a lot about what's the emotion that we're transmitting here. And you make it flow from panel to panel. So that's been very interesting to try to see the world from a different angle, I think, that what you normally do. And I have done that in a way with short stories and short stories, novellas, and novels. Each bring something different into play. You can do things with short stories that you can't do with novels, and vice versa. And so I've known that all my life, and now it's just been kind of not realizing, but remembering in a way that yeah, graphic novels and comic books can do things that novels can't do, or they can do it in a quite different way. They achieve a different side of purpose. And with comic books, it's also because serialization introduces a different element to something when you have a long-term serialization as opposed to graphic novels. And all of those things are changing the way you think about narratives and the rules of narrative. So I find that fun and interesting, but it was it hasn't been hard in a way. I think the people who hired me thought, oh, like novelists, they were like novelists have a really hard time letting go of the dense prose and and kind of thinking like a in a visual comic book or graphic novel sense. But that wasn't hard for me. It was more remembering the things that I read a lot in my when I was a teenager and kind of going back to the think about the panel, remember what made you want to look at the next page, remember why you would read a whole issue.
Each panel as an emotional beat is such a wise. It's one of those things where as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh, I am now going to include this in my comic making class. Rules. You talked a little bit about the rules there. I think this is a great segue into the intrigue, which you have coming out,
Yeah.
which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a noir story.
Yeah, it's a noir set in 1943 in Mexico in the countryside.
Now, noir is one of those things, which I found out when I did my time travel noir infinitum graphic novel, where people take real umbrage if you use the word noir and you can't talk really deeply about the genre. If you can't go right into the weeds of it, some people just got so upset at me because I was like, "Oh, these are the parts of noir I like, and the rest I just left out. Sorry," and I moved on with my life. Have you, as a deep researcher, tell me the rules of noir that you decided would be worthy of your story?
So there's a quote, and I don't remember who said it right now. I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't remember the whole thing, but it's basically that noir is when the protagonist of the story, like in some other stories, it's the fall of a character, right? The fall from great heights. The great CEO falls from great heights, maybe in dramatic fiction. Uh, in noir, is the protagonist falls from the curbside to the gutter. That's noir.
Perfect.
It's romance in the air.
Yeah, nothing says romance like a bunch of randos crammed in a pub.
People will ask me, what kind of books do you write? And I say, well, it depends. Sometimes it's a straight up vampire like detective story, and sometimes it is something that is much more driven by the character and the mystery. And while I would claim you as a genre writer, I think that the genre elements are frankly less important than the way that your characters interact with each other and uh, how the story is built in the relationships with the intrigue. What kind of genre elements should we expect, and which are just the deep mysteries of that fall from the curbside?
Well, there's, the element of cynicism and moral ambiguity that characterizes the noir is definitely present there. It's about a lonely heart artist scammer who seduces women and takes their money, and he's got his latest scam. He's got his latest mark, and decides to uh, scam this woman in a small town. Then the niece of the woman finds out that he's a scammer, and the niece decides to help him actually to get the money out of there. So that's the basic setup. It's a noir because it's cynical, it's fatalism, moral ambiguity, all the things that we associate with the noirs, with um, the classic noir. It's set in 1943, which is like a big era for the emergence. This is the birth of the kind of category, so it works there, but it's also another kind of novel mixed with another kind of writing in the same time, which is costumbrismo, some Latin American, Hispanic kind of writing, and costumbrismo refers to a type of book where you zero on the customs and the habits of a specific time and place. And I really
I'm immediately struck. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm really struck about what that must do for you as someone who, in your body of work, is so connected to folklore. It's almost like an excuse for the folklore of a time and place. Is that what you're?
Yeah, it focuses on the everyday life. You have to provide an everyday life and a very kind of realistic yet idealized portrait of a space. It's hard to describe, but basically, if you're going to tell a story about a small town at a certain point in time, you might find costumbrismo being a quaint, a quaint little way of showing you um, the way of life in a certain place. So there's a kind of element of cruelty and pairing this with a norm. And this is the tiny village. These are the people in the small village, um, and then you brought this darker element. It's a little bit like if, you know, I don't know, if somebody in the Golden Girls was a serial killer. I don't know, Dorothy.
And I hope that something like that goes on the jacket copy. That's the little gold foil, right?
There was always something comforting I found about costumerismo. Yeah, it was like it's a bit like a warm hug, and then it's pairing what I felt was this warm hug with a knife to the back. So those were the emotions that I was kind of thinking about when I was trying to write this. So you're gonna get a really clear overview of a certain time and place, a small town, and kind of everybody in it. And you're also going to get these really bad people doing bad things in the small town. And so I found that idea really, really fun. I also like soap operas. I found a little bit of elements of soap, uh, of the melodrama that occur naturally in costumbrismo, uh, drawn drawn towards that. So it's a mix of a couple of things. But yeah, I think of it like that. It's what attracted me to it was that warm feeling. And then but I'm not warm and fuzzy. So I at the same time it's like now get out the gun. Right? Something of the sort.
Do you think genre okay, let me phrase that differently. I think genre is fun because melodrama is at home there. There's an element of suspension of disbelief whenever there's a genre element added to a story, be it supernatural or occult or some other thing. People go, "Oh, okay, it's like that now." And so we're allowed to paint people in a little bit more of a melodramatic brush to better fit this suspension of disbelief. Like if the world isn't quite as we want it, then these people don't have to be quite as we want it also. Um, is that something that you're conscious of in writing a book like The Intrigue, where how much is too far, how much pushes the melodrama and your love of the soap uh, to try to make it too sudsy? When do you wash away too much of the soap?
Yeah, I mean, I think David Lynch got it right when he was doing stuff like Twin Peaks or it, there is an element of the melodramatic introduces an element of the fantastic by itself without having to have vampires or whatever. That already takes you into a different plane of existence in a certain way. And then if you layer that on top with an element of the impossible, whether it's vampires or werewolves or things like that, it's kind of like a layer cake. It's changing by itself as opposed to um, kind of like a more toned down drama that we might find uh, in what we call literary books. And I find that very fun. I mean, Shakespeare does it all the time. It gets big, right? It gets big and it doesn't get small. And by the end of Hamlet, like I don't know how many people are dead on stage, but it's a lot at that point in time. So I do enjoy that. I enjoy injecting some of that. And the thing I don't like is Hallmark movies. I don't like Hallmark movies. I really despise them. And the holiday ones are the worst ones ever. And the reason I don't like them, but I do like soap operas, is because I think, or I feel, in Mexican telenovelas and traditional Mexican soap operas, that there is that I don't even know how to say it. I think there's something phony about the Hallmark experience. Um, and like the emotions are not real, is what I'm saying. The emotions are fake. Whereas I think with a Latin American soap opera, with the novela, there may be crazy things that may be happening. The protagonist might have discovered that the child that was taken from there 20 years ago was adopted by their rival and raised in this evil family. And after she wakes up from a coma and all that kind of thing. But I think the emotion is real. The rage or the lust or the desire for power or whatever are those things that are mixed in this thing. I think those are true emotions that at some point in time you encounter. Like you encounter like, ever I'm so furious or I'm so sad or I'm so horny, depending, on the situation. And that are ported into this medium. And obviously they are raised to 360 degrees. I think in Hallmark movies, there's no real emotion in there. There's a fakeness, almost like an AI generated thing that's happening there. And so I cannot connect with it, but
I
I
agree
can
with that on
connect
this
with
one.
outrageous soap opera plots.
So, for the dear listener, some may know this, but Winnipeg, where I live, is one of the meccas of Hallmark filming. There are a lot of Hallmark movies made here, particularly Christmas movies. And in the new neighborhood I moved into, often the streets are blocked off while they're filming a Hallmark Christmas thing. So I've spent a lot of time, Sylvia, thinking about exactly what you were just describing, literally on my walks through my own neighborhood, which is supposed to be a sacrosanct place for introspection, immediately interrupted by a Hallmark production. And this is how I characterize it. The difference, why I don't like Hallmark movies either, particularly the Christmas ones, is it's the difference between presenting a myth and a lie. Hallmark movies feel to me like a lie, whereas melodrama is more like the myth. Wouldn't it be cool to feel this way? And wouldn't it be cool? And you could kind of lift yourself up to the passions or bring yourself to the abasement of the debasement of those characters. And it's fun. It's a myth. Whereas the Hallmark brand is like a lie. If you did this, this would happen. And wouldn't it be great? And we're going to ignore everything else about what would really be happening as if it was normal. I just find that to be so difficult. Bless all of those who really enjoy the Hallmark Christmas movies. I understand completely the need for a comfort watch. Mine usually involves Jean-Luc Picard. So I'll just say I know what a comfort watch is for.
I knew that tonight would be an adventure. I told you.
All right, finish that cocoa. Let's blow the Santa stack.
Did you ever watch what was the big one in our we had Days of Our Lives. It was a big one when I was growing up. My sister and I would always fight for the TV. And I have to admit, as I got older, I didn't mind when she would win. I would make a great protest that I didn't want to watch the soap operas after school, but I didn't leave the room either. So, the last thing maybe that we should talk about as we wrap things up is the way in which you, as now a full-time writer, someone who has come a long way since KeyCon in 2013 when I first met you, the journey of being a writer is these days a literal journey. You got to get on trains, planes, automobiles. You got to beat the bushes. What is coming up for you that is unexpected in the new promotion of The Intrigue and some other things? Why don't you talk about what the year ahead is for you?
Well, we are going to wrap up kind of The Bewitching, which is the one that came out this year in 2025, and it's going to come out in paperback in 2026. So there's going to be some of that, hopefully. And then we're going to head into The Intrigue. And that is actually going to be a big unknown for me. It's going to be a very different year for me because I'm not going to the US. I told my publisher I cannot go promote it. And that is great. Again, writing, it's full of unexpected wrinkles and weird things. And so I said, I can't go to the US. I'm too afraid of crossing the border, which to me sounds crazy, but also oddly realistic as our world becomes more surreal every single day. And they said, that's okay, but that means I'm not sure exactly where I'm gonna be going. I have, there's a conference in Calgary that I'm going to go to. I'm planning to go to England to promote it there with my British publisher. And I just told my American publisher we have to find some online solutions for this, some things that I can do online, maybe some podcasts, maybe some other stuff. And so that is in a state of chaos and flux at this point in time, which I did not think would be the case a year ago when I was thinking about it. So there is that thing where you can have all the best intentions and the best plans, and then wham, something happens and derails you. And that's happened all over my career, and it's happening again. And so just fingers crossed that we have a good launch in July. I will say it is very hard it's much harder to promote things in Canada than in the US. And that's gonna sound weird to say that. Like it's harder, it's easier for you to promote your books in another country. It actually is almost
We I completely endorse this message. Super Pulp Science agrees completely. It really comes down to the density of people. Uh, that's how an idea transmits. You need density of population.
and there's just not some systems set up in Canada for that. So now that we're getting more patriotic, I am all for creating some other cultural centers or chances for cities that are not Toronto. Because, yeah, every time that you think about, oh, I got to promote my book, it's like I'm going to go to Toronto and then I'm going to go home because there's nothing else that I can literally do. It's just so hard to set up some events and do a tour in Canada. It it's just really difficult. So I am facing another stage in my career where I am having to think about these things more coherently and make a plan for Canada for next year that is beefier than my usual. I don't know. I'll just go somewhere and say hi.
In Calgary, if you get a chance to go to or reach out to or have your publisher reach out to Owl's Nest Books, they have such a warm and wonderful community that I found out about this past year. I You would love the people who run it. You would love the number of folks who show up to read books, you know, say that, capital R, read books, and they, really wonderful, so I would put that on your list or tell your, publicist to put it on their list. Al's Next Books is really wonderful little spot. You have your Patreon, you have other ways in which you as an author are supported?
Yes, my latest novel is The Bewitching. If you're like folklore and are interested in learning about Mexican witches, you should check out The Bewitching. I do have a website, silviamorenogarcia.com, that has all my Instagram and Facebook stuff. And I have a Patreon where I post. I also post on my blog, but the Patreon, if you like me, you can throw me $2 and it's, it's nice to have followers over there too. So that's kind of it. And we didn't get to talk about it, but there's a lot of scammers out there now. I had to have two fake Sylvia Moreno Garcia accounts deleted from social media. So if you are an aspiring writer, be very, very careful. Don't accept messages from weird people. Don't accept pitches from strangers telling you that for a small amount of money, they will get your book out there and you don't know who these people are. Especially with AI now, they're getting very crafty and trying to offer all kinds of services, and they're not good people. So check writers beware. So you know what's going on in terms of scams and things like that, and just be extremely alert. Scammers are scamming more than ever, and they do like to take advantage of a lot of kind of newer writers who just don't know the scene very well.
In a simpler, more elegant time, like the story, the intrigue, you had to send a letter direct to an individual, right? Now it can just go out as a mass machine.
Exactly. Exactly. And they really are massive. So yeah, just be extremely careful because you get things. I got one that was extremely ridiculous. It made me laugh so much I even forwarded it to my agent and he laughed too. It was saying, "We'll get Jenny or Gina Ortega on the phone tomorrow and you can make a bajillion dollars, dollars, dollars."
Just having a podcast means you get about 10 a week
Yeah.
related to that too. So, I know how much that sucks. Let me put it that way. So, dear listener, if you're one of those people who likes perusing the, shelves of your local bookstore, if you like to receive in your inbox some very insightful and from the front lines information and tidbits from publishing, Or if you are going to be in the UK this year, then you should definitely go over to sylviamorenagarcia.com.ca.
I'm gonna say .com. Oh,
.com.
but I should buy my CA domain.
That's right. You should. And follow Sylvia on her journey. I have so enjoyed our conversation. I have so many questions that maybe I'm going to ask you one final question that came up out of it. You'll see these are all the notes, all the wise things he said. I always write down the wise things people are saying. And then I circled one that I was like, oh, I probably won't have time for this. I've decided if you have time, if you have 3 minutes, I'm going to ask you this question.
Sure.
You mentioned gargoyle romance as you just like tossed it off as if it was an idea. And then I thought, you're so good at researching. I bet is this a real genre, gargoyle romance?
I have seen gargoyle romances, yes. I mean, monster romance is the kind of parent category.
Yes, I know, but monster romance, but specifically niche down gargoyle romance. Is this a subgenre?
I mean, I don't know if it's a subgenre yet, but I have seen gargoyle romances. I can tell you more than 20.
Come on.
Yeah. If you spend any time kind of looking through the Kindle world, you find all kinds of things. Like I have counted probably at this point more than 20 gargoyle romances.
Now, I have to ask. What is how does that work? How does because the gargoyle is keeping the bad guys away, I thought. So are they which part of the love triangle does the gargoyle fit into? This is what I need to know, Sylvia.
I haven't read it, but the gargoyle romance that I think is the most famous one is called Deceived by the Gargoyles by Lillian Lark. And it's about a librarian, a Kirby librarian, who gets involved with some gargoyles.
You're making this.
See more. I have not read it. I think this is the most famous one I've come up.
Okay,
So
let's make this
a lot
vow.
of people have. Yeah.
Let's make this vow to ourselves. Before I see you in person in Vancouver, let's both have at least read at least one chapter of our gargoyle romance so we knows about how the genre has evolved, right? Part of being a writer is being an explorer. And whatever genres there are, you should explore as widely as possible. So now you have opened my eyes, spread my wings to the gargoyle romance genre, Sylvia. Thank you so much. One of the things we've talked about today is the way in which you do what you have to do to make it work. If you are a person working on a story, working on a short story, working on your new gargoyle romance, and you're wondering what are the things you have to do to make it work, no, you don't need a house that has 7 laundry rooms. You just need sometimes to tell your family that they don't get to have dinner till you're done your writing. This has been Super Pulp Science. I'm GMB Kamichuk, encouraging you to join the fight and make comics.